It sounds like a joke. Neanderthal poop. It's not the kind of thing you expect to find in a serious scientific discussion. We think of fossils as majestic things, a giant dinosaur skeleton, a skull with a heavy brow ridge. These are artifacts of power and mystery. Poop, on the other hand, is humble. It's mundane, it's something we get rid of and never think about again. But science has a way of finding profound truths in the most unlikely places. And as it turns out, ancient fossilized feces NJ. The technical term is coprolites are one of the most intimate and revealing windows into the past we have ever discovered. A skeleton tells you about an animal's frame. A stone tool tells you about its technology. But a coprolite tells you what was once alive inside that animal. It's a direct record of diet, health, and the microscopic world of the gut. It's a time capsule from the inside out, and when that coprolite comes from a Neanderthal, it does more than just fill in a few biological details. It challenges the very story we've told ourselves about who these ancient people were. For a long time, the popular image of a Neanderthal was a caricature, a brutish, club-wielding caveman. A failed evolutionary experiment who lived on a diet of nothing but mammoth meat before being swept away by the smarter, more sophisticated Homo sapiens. It's a simple, compelling story, but the evidence from their poop suggests it's almost entirely wrong. To understand what we've learned, we have to go to a place called El Salt in Spain. It's an archaeological site, a rock shelter where Neanderthals lived for thousands of years, on and off. Over generations, they left behind layers of history in the dirt floor, scraps of stone tools, animal bones, and the remains of their campfires or hearths. It was in these ancient hearths that scientists found something special. They found tiny, desiccated, mineralized fragments. They found the coprolites. The first question is always the most important one. How do you know it's Neanderthal poop, and not from a cave bear or a hyena or some other animal that might have used the shelter? This is where scientific detective work comes in. The context is the first clue. These bits were found buried deep in the sediment layers that correspond to Neanderthal occupation. They were right there in the ash of the fires where Neanderthals cooked and lived. You don't usually find animal droppings right in the middle of a human living space. But the real proof came from chemistry. The scientists didn't just look at the coprolites. They analyzed their molecular makeup. Living things produce specific chemical signatures. Think of it like a fingerprint. Humans and other omnivores who eat a mix of plants and meat produce a certain ratio of specific chemicals in their waste. One of these key markers is cholesterol, which comes from meat. Another is a group of compounds called phytosterols, which come exclusively from plants. If the coprolites belong to a pure carnivore, like a wolf or a lion, you would expect to see huge amounts of cholesterol markers and almost no plant markers. When the team at El Salt analyzed the material, they found both. They found the chemical signature of meat, which was expected. But they also found significant amounts of plant sterols. This was the smoking gun. It meant that whoever produced this waste had a mixed diet. It was the poop of an omnivore. And given the location, the tools, and the time period, the only omnivore it could have been was a Neanderthal. For the first time, we had direct, unambiguous biochemical proof of the Neanderthal diet, not just inferences from bones or tools. This discovery might sound small, but its implications were huge. It struck at the heart of the brutish carnivore myth. The old idea was that Neanderthals were hypercarnivores, specialized hunters of big game like mammoths, woolly rhinos, and giant deer. This theory came from good evidence, to be fair. Archaeologists found massive piles of large animal bones at Neanderthal sites. And chemical analysis of Neanderthal bones themselves, a technique called isotope analysis, showed a nitrogen signature similar to top-level predators like wolves. So, for decades, the consensus was that Neanderthals ate meat, and more meat. Their supposed reliance on big game was even used to explain their extinction. The theory went that as the climate changed and the giant Ice Age mammals disappeared, the overspecialized Neanderthals starved, unable to adapt. The clever, flexible Homo sapiens who could eat berries and roots and fish survived while the Neanderthals faded away. It was a neat and tidy evolutionary tale. The poop from El Salt messes up that tidy tale. It shows Neanderthals were not specialized carnivores at all. They were eating plants. A lot of them. They were supplementing their diet with whatever the local environment provided. This could have been roots, tubers, berries, nuts, or seeds. The coprolites can't tell us the exact species of plant they were eating, not yet anyway. But they prove the behavior, they prove that Neanderthals had a broad, flexible diet. They were not just hunters, they were gatherers. They were foragers. This changes how we must think about their minds. Being an effective omnivore requires a huge amount of knowledge. You can't just wander around the landscape randomly chewing on leaves. You need a detailed mental map of your environment. You need to know which plants are edible and which are poisonous. You need to know where they grow and when they are in season. You need to know how to process them. You need to peel this root. Do you need to cook this tuber to make it digestible? This isn't instinct. This is learned, culturally transmitted knowledge passed down from generation to generation. The evidence for plant eating wasn't just a one-off find at a single site in Spain. It was part of a growing wave of new evidence that was forcing a complete reevaluation of Neanderthal life. Scientists started looking more closely at other things like the gunk trapped on Neanderthal teeth. This dental calculus, or plaque, hardens over a lifetime, trapping microscopic bits of food, pollen, and bacteria. It's another tiny, incredible time capsule. When researchers analyzed Neanderthal dental plaque from sites across Europe, they found starch granules from various plants, including wild grasses, legumes, and date palms. At a site in Belgium, they found starches from water lilies, showing Neanderthals were even harvesting aquatic plants from rivers and marshes. The picture was becoming clearer and clearer. Neanderthals had a sophisticated understanding of their local plant life and incorporated it systematically into their diet. They were true generalists, exploiting a wide range of food sources, just like early modern humans. The poop was the first direct proof from inside the body, and the teeth confirmed it. But the story told by these ancient droppings goes even deeper than diet. It takes us into the invisible world of the Neanderthal gut. Every living creature has a microbiome, a complex ecosystem of trillions of bacteria, fungi, and other microbes living in its digestive tract. This gut community is essential for health. It helps digest food, produces vital nutrients, and trains the immune system. Your microbiome is a reflection of your diet, your health, and the environment you live in. Amazingly, DNA can survive for tens of thousands of years if it's preserved in the right conditions, like inside a mineralized coprolite. By carefully extracting and sequencing this ancient DNA, scientists can start to reconstruct the Neanderthal microbiome. It's like performing an autopsy on an ecosystem that has been extinct for 50,000 years. What they are finding is fascinating. For one, the Neanderthal gut seems to have been populated by bacteria that are very good at breaking down meat and tough fibers. This makes sense. Their diet was likely still heavy on animal protein, and the plants they ate would have been fibrous and unprocessed. But the analysis also reveals something more fundamental about human evolution. When scientists compare the Neanderthal microbiome to those of modern humans, they see both similarities and striking differences. We share some core groups of bacteria, suggesting a common ancestral gut ecosystem that goes back hundreds of thousands of years. But the Neanderthal microbiome appears to be more diverse, more similar in some ways to the microbiomes of other primates or modern hunter-gatherer societies than to people living in industrialized nations. This points to a modern problem. Our lifestyles with processed foods, sanitation, and antibiotics have likely wiped out a significant portion of our ancestral microbial diversity. We may have lost certain species of gut bacteria that our ancestors, including Neanderthals, relied on. This loss of diversity is now being linked to a range of modern health issues, from autoimmune diseases to allergies. By studying the Neanderthal gut through their poop, we get a baseline. We can see what a willed human microbiome looked like before agriculture, before cities, before modern medicine. It gives us a new perspective on our own health and the consequences of our modern world. The coprolites can also tell us about the health struggles Neanderthals faced. Life was not easy. By searching for the DNA of parasites, researchers can identify the kinds of infections they dealt with. The evidence from the L-salt coprolites suggests they were infected with intestinal parasites like pinworms and tapeworms. This isn't surprising. They were drinking untreated water and eating wild animals that were likely riddled with parasites. It's a stark reminder of the constant biological challenges our ancestors faced. It paints a picture not of heroic hunters, but of people struggling daily with disease and discomfort, just like humans throughout most of history. Perhaps the most humanizing evidence to come from Neanderthal remains, including their poop, relates to behavior that goes beyond mere survival. It points toward cognition, planning, and maybe even a form of primitive medicine. One of the key debates in human evolution is the control of fire. We know Neanderthals used fire. Their hearths are found at sites all over Eurasia, but did they just use it for warmth and to scare off predators? Or did they use it for complex tasks like cooking? Cooking is a revolutionary technology. It breaks down tough fibers and starches, making food easier to digest and unlocking far more calories. It also kills pathogens. Some anthropologists argue that cooking was the key innovation that allowed the human brain, a very energy-hungry organ, to grow so large. Finding proof of cooking is finding proof of a major cognitive leap. The coprolites from El Salt provided that proof. The chemical analysis didn't just show the presence of meat and plants, it showed that the molecules had been altered by heat. Specifically, they found high levels of compounds that are produced when cholesterol is heated to high temperatures. This strongly suggests the Neanderthals were cooking their meat. They weren't just gnawing on raw flesh. They were actively processing their food over a fire. This implies foresight and planning. It's a deliberate, multi-step process. You have to hunt the animal, butcher it, gather fuel, make a fire, and then cook it. That's not a simple brute's behavior. That is a human behavior. The evidence for sophisticated thinking doesn't stop there. An even more tantalizing possibility is that Neanderthals used plants not just for food, but for medicine. This idea comes mainly from the dental plaque evidence, but it's relevant to their overall knowledge of the natural world. At the El Cedron cave site, also in Spain, analysis of one Neanderthal's teeth showed he had a painful dental abscess. The plaque on his teeth contained DNA from the poplar tree, which contains salicylic acid as the active ingredient in aspirin. It also contained DNA from penicillium, a mold that produces a natural antibiotic. This individual was clearly in pain, and it appears he was eating things that had no nutritional value but were known to have medicinal properties. Was he intentionally treating his pain and infection? We can't know for sure. It's impossible to prove intent from 50,000 years ago, but it is a remarkable coincidence. And it fits perfectly with the picture supported by the coprolites of a people with a deep and nuanced understanding of plants. If you know which plants to eat for food, it's a very small step to knowing which ones make you feel better when you are sick. This suggests a level of self-awareness and problem-solving that we once thought was unique to our own species. So, what does this all mean when we put it together? The poop, the plaque, the bones, and the tools all start to tell a new and consistent story. The Neanderthals were not clumsy, dim-witted carnivores who stumbled into extinction. They were successful and adaptable people who thrived across a vast and challenging territory for hundreds of thousands of years. Far longer, in fact, than Homo sapiens has been around, they were intelligent omnivores. They managed fire to cook their food. They had a sophisticated knowledge of their environment, using a wide variety of plants for food and possibly for medicine. They likely had complex social structures to facilitate large game hunts and to share knowledge. They were not a clumsy rough draft of a human. They were a different kind of human. This makes their eventual disappearance even more of a mystery. If they were so capable, so adaptable, why are we here and they are not? The old simple answer that we were just smarter and better no longer holds up. The poop of all things helps to prove that. They weren't outcompeted because they had a bad diet. Their diet was flexible and sophisticated. The real answer is probably a complex mix of factors. Perhaps it was subtle differences in fertility rates. Perhaps modern humans had slightly better social networks that allowed for more trade and support during hard times. Or perhaps it was just bad luck with a rapidly changing climate. Or maybe, as genetic evidence suggests, the story wasn't one of replacement at all, but of absorption. We know that modern humans and Neanderthals interbred. Many people of non-African descent today carry a small percentage of Neanderthal DNA in their genomes. Perhaps they didn't so much vanish as merge into the larger incoming population of Homo sapiens. What started with a joke about caveman poop ends with a profound shift in our understanding of our place in the evolutionary story. The evidence found in those tiny, fossilized fragments from a Spanish cave forces us to be more humble. It reminds us that we were not the sole inheritors of human intelligence. The world once had other thinking, feeling people in it. The Neanderthals were our closest evolutionary relatives. Studying them is like looking into a distorted mirror. We see things that are familiar, the use of tools, the control of fire, a varied diet, the care for the sick. And we see things that are different, their robust bodies, their distinct facial structure. The coprolites help to bring the reflection in that mirror into sharper focus. They fill in the biological reality of Neanderthal life. They tell us what they ate for dinner. They tell us about the churning world inside their guts. They tell us about their parasites and their health. It's an incredibly intimate connection to the past. It's easy to look at a Neanderthal skull in a museum and see it as an object, an it. It's much harder to do that when you are confronted with the biochemical evidence of the last meal a Neanderthal, he or she, ever ate. It transforms them from a fossil specimen into a person. Science is a process of peeling back layers of assumptions. For a long time, our view of Neanderthals was based more on our own need to feel special and unique than on the actual evidence. We created a caricature to make ourselves look better by comparison, but as our scientific tools get more and more precise, we are able to analyze things that were once considered junk, like hardened tooth plaque or a speck of fossilized poop. And this junk is telling us the truth. The truth is that the line between us and them is blurry. The story of human evolution is not a straight line leading inevitably to us. It's a messy branching bush, with many different experiments in how to be human. The Neanderthals were one of those experiments, and for a very long time they were a very successful one. Their poop is their legacy, a quiet testament left in the dirt waiting for us to find it and finally to understand. It tells us that they were resourceful, they were resilient, and they were, in their own way, just as human as us.